So here we are at part 4 of my introduction to Wargaming vlogs. And what we're going to do is take the theories from the other parts, pause for a moment, think about your rule set, think about your tactics, think about the type of lists and missions that you're going to encounter and what you want to play. And now we're ultimately going to cut down on the learning curve by applying them. Now, we want to win games. I want to win games, not at the expense of my opponents. I'd really rather prefer players, because for me, wargaming and board gaming is a very social aspect. And as much as I want to go against you and I want to win, I want you, my opponents, my team. I want us to have a good time. So I'm going to give you the best game that I can. I'm going to try and win, but even if I lose, it's going to be such a hard-fought battle, and I'm not going to give up. Now, I say this because that is the feeling that I want to put into every game. But the truth is, when you start a new wargaming system, and this could be your first jump into wargaming, or it could be, hey, I've had experience in 2 or 3 other systems, and now I'm starting this new system. Whatever tactics you're bringing in, the first couple of games, I know you're asking for a number, the first 5 to 8 games don't count. And I say that because often there's this pressure to want to win. There's this desire to win, and winning validates our tactics. You know what's going on. You're doing well because you're winning. But there are dues to pay. And you're learning the system. You're learning what tactics work. You're learning what type of lists you want to build. It's one thing to take the rule set and read through it and see the diagrams and maybe push some test models around. Important. It's vastly different to go and now play a game against an opponent trying to leverage good tactics against you, or just dealing with the dice. That's why we talk about dice flow, and that's why we talk about list building from those perspectives. So the first few games, they don't count. But as you get more experience, and you have to let your ego, you have to let your expectations go for those few initial games. But as you become more confident, as you tweak your list, as you learn the tactics and you enjoy the missions, we want there to be explosive growth. So the idea is, if you just regularly played games, and maybe it's 1 a week, maybe it's a couple of times a month, maybe you're training for a tournament and it's 2 or 3 times a week. Imagine the progress that you can make in 6 months. So envision that progress 6 months from now. Now, that goal, what if I said we can take that goal, and it's ambitious. It is. But in the introduction, I wanted us to be ambitious. I can get you there. I can get you there in 3 months. If you're willing to do a little bit of training. If you're willing to step back for a moment and approach the game from this perspective. And that's what I'm going to share with here to give you the final tool in your toolkit. And now as we take things onto the mailing list, as we take things onto the blog, these concepts are going to be there in everything I illustrate. So I've given you kind of my blueprint, my code of how I'm approaching wargaming, narrative gaming, board gaming to kind of crack that matrix in there. So every game, you're up against a timer. And in some game systems, and again, right now I'm trying to keep this as generic as possible because I don't know the wargaming system that you enjoy. So I don't want to say this is with X-Wing Miniatures, fantastic game. Love it. Great narrative, great models, great social support aspect. But if Star Wars isn't your thing, I want you to be able to port it over to your system. So we're looking at templates. We're looking at concepts. But every war game has a timer, whether it's the game lasts X number of turns. Let's talk about some examples here. Warhammer 40,000 is a sci-fi. I know we just said we weren't going to talk about examples. Warhammer 40,000 is a sci-fi futuristic war game. The game lasts 6 turns, where you go and then I go, or I go and you go. When both of us have completed our army actions of moving, of shooting, of launching an assault, of the morale phase, of the support phase, when that's ended, a turn is done. So we only have X number of turns to complete the mission to see who wins. X-Wing Miniatures, where we're dogfighting, or Wings of Glory, where the mission is, look, we're going to dogfight. Every turn that I inflict damage on your ships or your planes, you're going to become weaker and weaker. That is the timer. So the game doesn't end in 5 or 6 or 7 turns. It could end in 2 turns. I hope not. Or it could drag on 7, 8, 9, or 10 turns. But there is a timer in there. Another game that I enjoy called Chain of Command, as you take losses to your army, it's historical, World War II, your command dice get less and less. So at the start of each turn, and we're talking about this to illustrate the timer, because in your wargaming system, you're going to have to find and discover what the timer is. And it might be well-defined or it might not. In Chain of Command, you start with 6 dice, 5 or 6 dice, and D6s, and you roll them, and based on your results, that determines the number of units that you can activate. As you take losses, as your command structure breaks down, you get less and less command dice to roll every turn. So you go from 5 to 4 to 2 to 1, and when you hit 0, effectively your force is broken and the game ends. There's always going to be a timer. Now the key for practice, you've got your list, you've got your dice mechanics, you've got your general tactics, you refine them, is to play a game to the midway point of the timer and then stop and ask yourself, if this game continues, the most likely conclusion, who is going to win? So in the case of Warhammer 40,000, this sci-fi miniature game, we have 6 turns. Whatever the mission's going to be, we play it out to turn 3. At turn 3, we stop and we ask and we look, if the game continues, most likely who is going to win? Now, this is doing 2 things right away. Let's say a normal game of Warhammer 40,000 over 6 turns is going to take 4 hours to complete. It's a big game, 2,000 points. That's 4 hours of play, a fun play, of great play. But I'm looking to cut down. I'm training right now. I want to have a good time. I want to enjoy the game, but I'm training. We're in training mode as opposed to narrative mode on here. If we have an afternoon to game, you and I, and we have 4 hours or 6 hours, we're going to get 1 game in, maybe 2 or 1.5. But if we play it out to turn 3, the midpoint, or in X-Wing Miniatures, if we're playing with a list of 100 points, once my list gets knocked down to 50 points, we're going to stop and we're going to assess. What that means is I can complete the games quicker. I can get more games in. I know the logical conclusion. So right away, whatever time you're spending to play games, you're going to double that. You might even triple that. So you're going to be practicing your tactics, your list building, your dice flow, your dice management, everything in a normal gaming session, only it's going to be accelerated. Now, this is also the second part. This is where it is so powerful, such a powerful technique. It is going to reinforce, if we go back to the intro video in this vlog series, active versus passive players, it's going to reinforce you as an active player. It is going to razor sharpen your tactics, your command of the game through rules, through list building, through tabletop tactics very, very fast. Because you're going to go into each game, instead of having 6 turns for the entire game, or instead of playing a game of 100 points for your squadron, if you know the game is going to end at the halfway point, that means you are going to be more in tune, more aggressive in a good way, where you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to try to take out my opponent's army, protect my own army, or my own armada, or fleet, or ships, robots, tanks, armored column, and I'm going to win the mission in 3 turns. You're putting an artificial accelerant on the timer to put yourself into a win category in half the time. It is going to force you to have all these interlocking pieces very, very quick, because in your mind, you don't have 6 turns. You don't have 100 points. You don't have 6 chain of command die. You got 3 chain of command dice. You got 50 points, and you got 3 turns. So this idea of playing the game to the not only playing the game to the halfway point, but also being aggressive, being active instead of passive in your tactics, immediately turn 1, immediately turn 2, immediately turn 3. Oh, well, whatever the halfway point is going to be. It's going to cut down your learning curve. It's going to accelerate your understanding of tactics so much in there.